Hello and welcome to another episode of Business Beat with me, Odette. So it's post-COVID, it's post the budget speech, it's almost the end of the first quarter of 2023, and we are all looking at the economy and asking ourselves, gosh, now what? Well, there's also this thing called transformation, and it also happens to be March, so it means it's Human Rights Month. We'll be celebrating human rights pretty soon. With me is a BEE expert strategist who's going to talk about this thing called transformation and our right to be able to access participation in the economy as South Africans. Deon, welcome to Business Beat.
Morning, Odette. Thank you for having me.
It is so good to have you. Welcome to part one of a three-part series. Very, very important discussion that we're going to be having for everybody to understand, given the current economic state in South Africa, right? So let's start by saying, what is transformation? And I know that it is kind of regulated or enshrined in what they call sector codes, right? And this is applicable to every kind of industry or sector in South Africa. What is a sector code?
So I think we need to start with what are the codes and why are they there? And why do they look the way they do?
Right.
And what has happened, government took transformation as an agenda and unpacked it in specific objectives.
Right.
Who owns and runs the economy? Who works in it and how do they develop and train? Where do we spend our money and how do we help smaller people and individuals? And that has been the cornerstones of transformation. 3 pillars, and it's been...
What are those 3 pillars?
The 3 pillars about ownership, people development and procurement and transformation of the value chain.
Right.
So those pillars have been part of the agenda for all time since the codes came out, since the first transformation strategy documents were created.
Right.
And what happened over the last 2 decades is they were refined, more real, in some cases made more difficult. And the intention is to guide businesses in terms of what they should do to help us change the economy.
You're almost answering, but I think in part, what do these sector codes actually achieve? You know, because you say it's there to guide businesses, but what do the codes actually achieve?
It's all of those.
Right.
So there's, when you look at the whole transformation agenda, you have 2 groups if you want to polarize it.
Right.
You have those that are identified as the beneficiaries of transformation, and those are identified as those who have the obligation to assist with the transformation. And they overlap, obviously. But when you look at it, you have to ask the question from both perspectives to say, if I'm a white South African, I cannot be black. But I can do things that can change the economy. Am I doing the right things? And then the codes came in and said, you can have recognition for what you've done. And that'll elevate you on a scorecard. So you literally get a scorecard like in sports.
It's like an incentive.
You get an incentive, yeah.
Right.
And that works in a very cascading way in the economy. So if I procure from my suppliers, how I procure and who I procure from then has a cascading effect on where they procure from and what they do and how transformed they are, which in turn has a cascading effect. So the whole idea of transformation is to create this cascading model of transformation that permeates through the entire economy. Right. And it always focuses on, again, those who should be the beneficiaries of in order to catch up and compete fairly, and those who are maybe ahead, already in business, or privileged, or whatever we want to call it, and what could they do and should they do in order to make a difference, and how do they get recognition for it, and what benefit do they get if they do this properly. So it was this balance that has been worked into the codes. The sector codes, on the other hand, takes this entire model and applies it to a sector by saying, we have a sector, construction sector, transport sector, tourism sector, and then a group of people representing the sector thought process comes together, forms a council, maybe government appoints them, and they say our sector is unique and we need to focus on specific things in our sector. And if the motivation is strong enough, government then said, okay, well then you can have a set of codes for your sector so that it's more specific.
I remember the euphoria after our 1994 elections, right? We're almost 30 years into democracy. Since BEE came into being, it was amended and reviewed to become triple BEE,
Yeah.
broad-based Black economic empowerment. But that's been running for a while. The sector codes have been going for a while. Has the time now come for us to review these sector codes? Yes or no?
All the sector codes have to be reviewed from time to time to see, are they achieving their objectives? And I think more predominantly, are they achieving the objectives that they were created for? Are they getting the results that they were looking for? Is the transformation as defined happening, yes or no?
Okay.
And if the answer is yes, then maybe changing a few things here to keep up, because the codes itself, the BEE codes are reviewed on a regular basis. Every couple of years, they've reviewed the procurement regulations, they've reviewed the skills development element. So what happens there is the other sector codes fall behind, and now they have to catch up. Now, that means that every now and then, the sector code, if it really justifies its existence, needs to have a look and say, I need to align with all the other elements. We saw a big change when the amended codes came out a few years ago, 2013, when it was gazetted. And then all the sector codes had to and did, with the exception of transport, had to align themselves with those changes because they were quite fundamental.
Right.
And now what has happened, there's been a progression of smaller changes, skills development, and those need to be playing catch up to the sector code so that they can actually deal with that.
Okay. In your experience, as we wrap up part one of this very, very important discussion, 3 things that you've come across that are the challenges that you face as an independent when you come into a client and you help them put in place a strategy to achieve true transformation. What are 3 things, good or bad, that you often encounter?
The most important one is the business case. What is the business case for transformation? We always ask our clients, if you were a level 1 Black woman-owned organization, what would your business change like? And it's not always easy to answer that question. People, they don't know the answer, or they want to avoid the answer. They know the answer, but they're trying to, no, because this is going to cost me money and make me make decisions I don't want to. So you get that initial resistance, which we normally focus around the business case.
Right.
And the second one is, when you deal with the codes the first time, it's very clear for me, clients that have been with us for 4 or 5 years versus clients that come to us the first time, that shock and horror of, I have to do this to get to a level 1, but this is difficult.
But it's not I have to do this to get to level 1, I have to do this to participate in the economy, right?
Yes, back to the business case.
Back to the business case.
Which means that if they can see it, and bear in mind, most companies come to us when they have a reason to compel. There's somebody said to them, you have no more choice. So then you have a conversation.
Okay, and
the third thing for me is to try and keep it in the interest of those involved in the value chain of the company.
Right.
BEE is not a checkbox exercise. You're not supposed to take a checkbox and say, I've done that, give me my level 1, thank you very much, off I go.
Okay.
You're supposed to integrate your strategies with transformation, develop people that will work for you, reach out to communities where you source your staff from, focus on suppliers that you buy from. And sometimes that gets lost in translation in the hunt for a level 1 or a level 2 or a level 3.
Because then it becomes a discussion about black versus white.
Yeah, fortunately what I see now is there are very few companies where this is black and white. Everybody's joined the agenda.
I would like to believe you on that, but I'll pick that up with you in part 2 next week. I think that there's a lot to be said about companies understanding and companies wanting and companies that are really truly enabling transformation and the fears that surround it. But we'll pick that up in our next discussion. So we've come to the end, South Africa, of part 1 of this very, very important discussion on transformation. We know that there are so many factors that impact how a business transforms, how a sector transforms, and whether or not all the people in South Africa have the right, the access, and the equality to contributing to and participating in our vibrant economy. Until next time.